All right, let's let's hear what you guys were discussing. Inshallah, anyone want to share? Bismillah. What's the wisdom we're missing? Yeah, go ahead. Mm. So the plethora of options and the variety around us has led us to become, I think you said, spoiled, entitled, so we can't appreciate something simple. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Mm. Right. The excessive focus on materialistic possessions in our society, in the media, has blinded us from the simple blessings that we have all around us. Beautiful. Beautiful. Anyone? Yeah. Right. Capitalism. That is the reflection of a Monday morning, Monday evening, right? Just, yeah. Um, Life is so fast. And when life is so fast, you can't pause and you can't appreciate anything small because there's no moment to do so. You're always running and rushing, right? So, what's the wisdom we're missing, guys? We are masters of identifying the problem. Yeah. Okay. So, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying you're providing suggestions on how to slow down. So, like, just be in the moment, don't obsess over the past, and don't, you know. Mm-hmm. Right. Let it be. And if you do so, then you can finally start to notice the simpler things. Okay. Beautiful. Anyone else? Yeah. Okay. Retreats. You going to RIS? No, I'm joking. The knowledge retreat. MashaAllah. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Right. So lack of gratitude, um, in tandem with heedlessness, and so we're just kind of we're heedless. So then we're not able to even notice the blessings and thereby be grateful. So we're just kind of missing the whole thing. Jazakallah khair. Yeah. 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 Um, it's a privilege to be alive. It's a blessing. Again, sometimes it doesn't feel that way. If we're just real, sometimes it doesn't feel that way. But no, it is a reality underlying our existence that it is definitely a privilege to be alive. Um, and to not. So one of the wisdoms would be then, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is to not get so attached to outcomes that we then get really upset and then miss the smaller, nicer things, or just nice things that we have that we take for granted. Beautiful. Ties into your tawakkul point about trusting outcomes, so that we can not obsess over them and actually just focus on what's right in front of us. Beautiful. And one more here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The thief of joy, comparison. So, how do you stop comparing? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to be grateful when the other dude has such a nice car, right? So, how do we stop that to just notice how nice mine is? What's the trick? Right, right. Beautiful. It's prophetic teaching. Prophetic teaching is control your gaze. We often think about controlling our gaze in relation to halal and haram. He tells us if you're always looking at people who have more, don't be surprised when your joy is robbed. Right? So it's controlling your gaze. The Quran says this too. ولا تمدن عينيك إلى ما متعنا به أزواجا منهم زهرة الحياة الدنيا. Don't always be looking at all the good that other people have. And honestly, social media is, for a lot of us, it's literally that, right? And it just makes you um, over overlook the blessings in your own life. Rather, he said, focus on those who are less fortunate, right? And I think that's what you're saying is just realize that there are people far less fortunate than you. Number one, be a source of helping them, and two, just be grateful how privileged you are. Absolutely, absolutely. Go ahead. Times of hardship make us grateful for the little things, right? Everything's falling apart, and it's like, thank God this one thing hasn't fallen apart. Alhamdulillah, right? Beautiful. Yeah, it's real, real, 100%. Yeah, it's not easy. It's a constant struggle. And even when you feel like you're doing better, you can still have lapses and moments where you kind of find yourself comparing again. 100%. It's a struggle. Jazakallah khair for sharing that. Um, okay, so now that we're yeah, go ahead. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, who you surround yourself with will impact the the way you look at things. And so to have friends around you that are very grounded and can really give you that perspective is it's a great blessing. Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. All right, we'll get started inshallah. We're good. All right. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala sayyidina rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala amma ba'd. I want to begin with a verse from the Quran. This verse is perhaps for some of us a really well-known verse. It's in the 29th chapter of the Quran. It's the second verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Ankabut, the chapter of the spider, he asks a question. He says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. He says, do people think that once they say that they believe in Allah, that they'll be left alone and they won't be tested? This is a verse that many of us will have heard. But I want to focus on just the beginning part. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do people think that they're going to be believers and Allah won't test them? Essentially, what Allah wants us to do through this verse is examine our expectations in life. Examine what it is that you and I expect from life and what we expect to happen in life. There's a really well known saying amongst the scholars of our tradition, which is Al hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwurihi, which is what translates to that the judgment that you'll pass in relation to something, the decision you'll make about it, is always rooted in your conceptualization of it. That based on how you conceptualize something, you'll come to then reach conclusions about it or a person, for example. And I'll give you an example. Um, Imagine you see someone and somehow you reach this conclusion in your head that this person is a really evil person. In your mind, this is not a good person. That's your conceptualization of them. Suddenly you see them do something good. And now you have to make sense of it, right? You have to deal with the dissonance there. And you say, wait, they're just being manipulative. They're just being manipulative. Yeah, like they're outwardly acting like they're good, but I know that's not actually who they are. Why are you not letting the action, the good action that they did, speak for itself? Because your judgment is rooted in your conceptualization. If you have someone that you deem to be good and they do something wrong, you'll say, they must have had a bad day, or it was just a mistake. They must have forgotten. You reach conclusions based on your conceptualization of the person. I mean, this is so essential to come back to our conceptualizations, our expectations of how we think something, someone is, and then what we can, reasonably expect from them. I'll give you another example that's a really common I think, understanding people have. Sometimes our conceptualization of a healthy and loving relationship is that the other person will never hurt me. If they loved me, they'll never hurt me. That's not true. Because it's very common in relationships, especially those that last for decades, and generally speaking, it's a healthy relationship. Along the way, there's a lot of ups and downs. There are behaviors that the other person assumes are very painful and hurtful, sees them as such. Yet, they're able to survive. The marriage, the relationship lasts, survives. Why? Because that's just not true. That because someone loves you, that they'll never hurt you. It's part of life in relationships. What becomes really important then is to learn how to repair. When there's rupture, which there inevitably will always be ruptures, do you know how to repair? That's probably the better predictor of whether or not this relationship will last. But when we work from the conceptualization that if they loved me, they wouldn't hurt me, then the moment someone hurts me, I immediately interpret that to mean they don't love me. And if they don't love me, why be in this relationship? Let's put an end to it. And so then we burn bridges right, left, and center. It seems like we just can't hold down a friendship for more than like 6 months to a year before someone hurts me, and then I think they don't love me, so I cut them off. Our conceptualizations are so critical. Like I was mentioning, when you incorrectly conceptualize something, you're going to come to hold expectations of it that are flawed. And then when reality doesn't align with our expectations, we're deeply disappointed. That is really disappointment right there. Disappointment is when we plant the seeds of expectation in a garden, and we don't necessarily water it, or the seeds that we planted, we didn't even realize what they were of when we planted them. So when they bloom, we're shocked. And that's why it's really important to know what expectations you go into, or you go with into anything. There's a story of a man, right? He went to a doctor. And he said, "Doctor, every time I touch some part of my body, I feel pain. I'm in pain. What's wrong? Why is it that no matter where on my body I touch, I feel pain?" And so the doctor examined him and discovered what? That his finger was in pain, right? That his finger was in pain. The individual is thinking, I don't know why my whole body hurts. Every time I touch somewhere, it hurts. My body hurts. It's like, no, that's an incorrect conceptualization. An incorrect diagnosis will lead to an incorrect treatment. And so our understanding, our conceptualization of the reality of this world will determine what we come to expect of it. So what is it that you're expecting from the world? What do you think you're entitled to in this world, in this life? Because remember, if we're incorrectly conceptualizing this life and this world, we shouldn't be surprised when we find ourselves repeatedly let down. Repeatedly let down. Because our conclusion could be that you just can't trust anybody in life, or that life just sucks. Or you could step back and say, wait, let me examine my conceptualization. There's this classic why me question that we ask when something happens to me. Why me? There's this unspoken, unmet expectation with Allah, which is, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, why me? What's the problem? Because someone could equally ask the question, why not me? Why not? The why me question is rooted in some expectation we're holding of the world. That's what it is. I've kind of come up with my own expectation of who I think Allah is, what I think this life is, and how I think it should be. And then I expect the world to play out the way I want it to play out. It doesn't. And then I feel betrayed and I feel let down. And it's very easy in your moment of pain to blame God and others and the world. It's much more difficult to step back and say, wait, what expectations did I go in with to begin with? Now let's reflect a little bit on life and what we think about life. You know, as young children, what's the highest objective of a young child who's like 6 years old? What's their goal every day when they wake up? Any of y'all have like siblings maybe who are like 6 and so what are they thinking about every single day? Having fun. Right? Having fun. It's sensory pleasure and joy. It's happiness, thrills, excitement, and everything else feels like an interruption getting in the way. So school, sitting in class, God forbid. You know, maybe you were like me. Maybe you lived for recess. Right? Recess was the highlight because you finally got to do what life was all about at that age. You know, my children, and I don't know if you have any other parents here, but my children, for them, it's always like, can we go somewhere? Can we go do something? Like that's life for them, right? That is a good day. What's a good day for you? Maybe it's just like sitting on the couch, right? Coffee, no work, feet up, right? Just something basic. But children, I want to go here. We just went somewhere yesterday. Yeah, but today's a new day. We got to go somewhere else. They're just so excited about thrills. Now, as a child, you don't have much responsibility. So the consequences of them pursuing pleasure all the time, it's really not that serious. They don't even have the brain development to begin to start to like reflect on higher objectives and aims and loftier aspirations, right? They're just so young. They can't even do that. So it makes total sense that for them, the most important thing is what feels good. That's what they have access to, is their senses. Now, adults. Imagine adults who grow up and they're still operating from the same paradigm, where life is still about happiness, you know, that fleeting emotion and sensation of joy. That's what life is about. So, what does that look like? That looks like living for the weekend, right? Because you take on some responsibility, right? Maybe you take on the responsibility of work, maybe even family, maybe you're married, maybe you have children. But when someone lives with that objective of, joy and excitement and thrills and just the highs of life, everything else feels like it's getting in the way. Even your spouse asking you to stay home that night is like, oh, God, marriage takes your freedom away. Right? That's where it comes from. All of these responsibilities are just obstacles getting in the way from me doing what's fun. That becomes the objective. And what's interesting is, how long are you going to do that for? Look, I'm not saying you should never have fun and do fun things. But there's a big difference between doing that to kind of relax and doing that as your ultimate life objective. Everything is geared towards living in that way, pursuing that pleasure. There's a big difference. Now, Henry David Thoreau, he said, many go fishing all their lives without knowing that it is not fish that they're after. Thoreau mentions that many go fishing their whole lives and they don't realize it's not even the fish that they're after. Many of us spend our lives pursuing what we think is fulfillment, is what we're meant to be pursuing. It's joy, it's happiness, it's status. We're pursuing these things. And then we don't seem to get them. Or when we get them, what we think happens afterwards, which is I finally feel enough, is not the case. So then what? It's time to step back and ask again, how are we conceptualizing life? Now think about this. If happiness and joy is the highest objective, then pain is the enemy. If happiness and joy are the greatest goods in life, then pain is your greatest enemy. Wisdom traditions, including the Islamic tradition, they've always viewed pain as a teacher that comes bearing profound lessons. But again, that's only if you conceptualize life a certain way. From our lens, where the way that many adults today live their lives, pain is seen as an enemy. Every effort is made to get rid of pain. Now, one writer, they put it this way. They say, if we focus exclusively on pursuing happiness, we may regard pain as something to be ignored or resisted. But listen to this line. This is profound. They write, but the art of happiness is also, and at the same time, the art of knowing how to bear pain well. It's the art of knowing how to bear pain well. And I'm going to expound on this a little bit more later. There's a theory known as the hedonic treadmill theory, like hedonism, the treadmill of hedonism. It's this idea that as you pursue happiness and joy and these fleeting sensations and emotions, these states of being that are temporary, you achieve it, but you always end up coming back to a baseline, homeostasis. You come back. Even difficulty, right? Even difficulty, you're negative, and you come back. That's the story of life. The thing is, if we make those feelings the objective, we're constantly on the treadmill going faster and faster, thinking, yeah, maybe at the next speed I'll get it. I'll reach it. I'll find it. And you're not. We don't get that. And even if we do get all that we set out for, right? How many of us, we have gone through life telling ourselves, if I just get this next thing, I'll finally be satisfied. If I just get into that university, you got in there. And no, it didn't fill the emptiness. If I just graduate, it didn't fill the emptiness. Get that job, didn't fill the emptiness. If I get married, didn't fill the emptiness. At some point, you have to pause and say, wait, maybe I'm conceptualizing this whole thing wrong. Maybe what I've come to believe is what I'm meant to be pursuing is not actually what I'm meant to be pursuing. That's difficult when the whole society around you is telling you you're doing great. They're all looking at you and, liking your posts on LinkedIn, and on paper everything looks good, but internally it's just emptiness. So then what's missing? At this point, it's hard to pinpoint what's missing. I don't even know. I've jumped through every hoop asked of me, and I'm not where I thought I was meant to be. See, as early as Aristotle, humans were philosophizing over the highest good in life. What are we meant to be pursuing? We're here in life. What should I expect from life, and what should I aim for? And so his famous conclusion is a concept in Greek known as eudaimonia or eudaimonia. This is sometimes translated as happiness, but that could be really misunderstood because that would just assume that everyone's chasing a thrill. We're just chasing feelings, vibes. But we all know that that's not sustainable. It's not long lasting. His way, if you read his Nicomachean Ethics, the way he describes it is much more about fulfillment in life and living a purposeful life. Now, revelation in Islam, it comes to guide us to these higher objectives in life. It tells us what life is, and it informs us what to expect from it. This is really important because Aristotle was just coming up with his own ideas. Right? Humans who philosophize independent of revelation are attempting to just posit another theory. Revelation is not just another theory. Revelation is sent to us by the creator of the universe, of the world. He is the one who created the world. He knows the nature of the world through and through. And so he reveals to us, this is what this world is, and this is what you should expect from it. And if a lot of us, if we paused and compared our expectations of life, what we think we ought to be pursuing, and we compare it with the Quran or the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we might be surprised and go, that's not what I understood. You know, in the Quran and Hadith, you will frequently see conversations about peace and contentment. Rarely, if ever, will you see emphasis on happiness, farah. Rarely. There's a verse, قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا. There's a verse about that, sure. But typically speaking, it's not about farah. It's not about a joy and a happiness. It's about peace. It's about contentment. It's about sakina. Itmi'nan. It's about, Allah will talk about ثُمَّ أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ, ثُمَّ أَنزَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ السَّكِينَةَ. He revealed sakina, rahmah, compassion, mercy, tranquility. I'll share a hadith with you. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لَيْسَ الْغِنَى عَنْ كَثْرَةِ الْعَرَضِ. He said, contentment doesn't lie in the abundance of possessions that you have. Materialistic possessions. He says, وَلَكِنَّ الْغِنَى غِنَى النَّفْسِ. He says, true contentment is in the self-sufficiency of your heart. It's not in how much you have, but in how little you need. Right? And think about this. We understand this in certain contexts. Any of y'all know someone who refuses to drink coffee because they don't want to be dependent on it? They don't like that feeling of being dependent on it. Anyone? Show of hands. Y'all know people like that? I mean, they're missing out. But like, you can see the sentiment. The sentiment is, I don't want to feel dependent on this. I want to be able to function without it. And they feel like they're better off for it. Because like, I could just go without it. And if you people who need it, God forbid you wake up and you don't have access to your caffeine. Right? So, dependence. Ghina. Imagine understanding peace and contentment and the objective not being acquisition, but the lack of need. It's a very different way of thinking about it. Because again, the world convinces us that you'll only be happy when you buy this product, when you live in this house, when you drive this car, right? When you wear the same clothes as that person, when you live in that neighborhood. That's what the world convinces us. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us the opposite. That you could live in that neighborhood, you could possess all that and still be miserable. And wallahi al-azim, look at the world today. Look at people who possess all that we, in our wildest dreams, wish we could possess. And look how miserable they are. Look how much they turn to drugs. Why such a disconnect from reality? Why? What does that say about what we think lies there and what doesn't actually lie there? The Prophet ﷺ was telling us it's not about that fleeting sensation and emotion. In the Quran, when Allah talks about marriage, what does He say? He says, "You get married. Why? For the ups and downs? For the thrills and the excitement? No. لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا." So you find tranquility, sakina, in your companionship, in your union and marriage to that person. It's about peace, right? Allah speaks about dhikr, remembrance of Allah, that through dhikr you find peace, you find tranquility. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Okay, so here's my question, and I'm looking for answers, by the way. What's the difference between boredom and peace? What's the difference between boredom and peace? Someone who hasn't answered. Now, I will ask you guys too. I'll get to you. I just want to give other people a chance who haven't answered. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you. Hmm. What's that rooted in? Okay. So let's say there's someone who's bored. Can we just tell them, just be peaceful? No, what's missing? Like, well, what's required for them to feel at peace? I mean, outwardly, it could look very similar. No? Outwardly, the two people, in terms of their circumstances, could look very similar. They're both just sitting on the sofa, right? Father, son. The father's just loving it, relaxed, and the son is just restless, bored. Story of my life, right? I'm loving the fact that we're just sitting at home doing nothing, and my son is like, "This is a waste of time." So what's missing? Anyone here have their hand up somewhere? No, that was me just hoping. Okay, accepting what? Right. I mean, that's a pretty large ask from a 6-year-old. Like, be with yourself. They'd be like, "Where am I if I'm not with myself?" You know? Yeah, yeah, definitely. Older people, yeah, you could tell them that for sure. But you're right. Yeah. Mm, right. Right. Beautiful. Yeah, the restlessness in boredom is rooted in a degree of expectation. We're meant to be doing something fun. We have this 1 hour. Why are we sitting here? Whereas, like you said, the person at peace is like, this is exactly where I need to be. You're lying in a hammock. That's it. That's life. You don't want to be anywhere else. Right? Whereas the person who's bored is seeking. It's rooted within their expectation of what's meant to be happening in that moment. Go ahead. Your hand was up, I think. Yeah. Right. They're just happy where they are. There's no need or want. They're content. Right? That life is literally playing out how it's meant to play out. Whereas that bored individuals, like, this is not how life is meant to be. Life is meant to be much more exciting. So why are we wasting our time sitting here? It feels wrong. Have you ever seen children get really upset? I'm bored. Like an injustice is being done to them, right? Like, I am bored, and you're like, my children stop saying I'm bored. You know why? Because I say good. I say mashallah, excellent. They're like, no more complaining to you, right? That my wife has to deal with it. No, um, but I genuinely believe that boredom is a great thing. I do. I genuinely believe boredom is the pathway to creativity. Really. So as we mature, though, right? peace becomes a far greater commodity than short-lived excitement. How many of y'all know what I'm talking about? Oh, you haven't reached that age yet. Oh, you're gonna get there. Um, as you get older, as you mature, I shouldn't say older because that's not necessarily tied to maturity, but as one matures, peace becomes a far greater commodity than short-lived excitement. Y'all haven't reached that age yet where if someone tells you like 9:30, what are we doing? They tell you a plan, you're like, that sounds great. They're like 9:30 p.m. You're like, 9:30 p.m. Do I look like a night owl to you? Right? That's 2 hours after Isha in the masjid. By that time, like PJ's on in bed, and then you want me to come out and do that? Some of y'all, I know, y'all are Ridgeway warriors, so like 9:30 is early for you. I get the day's coming. I'm just letting you know. The point is, it's so fascinating, right? Because a young child cannot understand how this adult is happy doing nothing. Why is it? Because the two expect very different things from life. The young child is living with this expectation that life should be fun and exciting. It's the objective. And the parent is totally content because peace means I'm literally where I want to be. There's nowhere else I would rather be. You know, one person said, look, if you're not happy having coffee with a friend, you won't be happy on a yacht. If you're not happy having coffee with a friend, you won't be happy on a yacht. I know some of y'all are thinking, try me, Sheikh. Try me. I'll show you. No, but really think about it. It's not predicated solely on your external circumstances. It's also on your state of being. Because imagine you're on a yacht thinking you should be somewhere else. I should be on a bigger yacht. Right? I should have my own private jet. What's this peasant life on a yacht? Right? But imagine someone who does not seek beyond. Sure, they might desire it, but they're content. Here, sitting here having coffee with you, I would rather be nowhere else. This is where I want to be. And that's peace. Yeah, you had your hand up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, wherever you go, there you are. Beautiful. I think the traveling you're describing is very much the experiences I have in terms of like the thrills and the checking off of the bucket list will make me, satisfied. Yeah, I think people will struggle coming back transformed. But if someone travels seeking um, seeking to learn from the world around them and coming face to face with different people, it can actually be profoundly transformational. But I get what you're saying. If a person's never ready to face themselves, they could travel the world and still be completely in the dark about where the problems lie. Absolutely. So, if peace is what we're really seeking, deep down, even if we don't even realize it, right? We're fishing and we don't realize it's not the fish we're after. It's the standing on the boat for 6 hours with our friends and talking about life. It's not about the salmon, right? Y'all know fishers? Anyone know people who are serious about fishing? Show of hands. Yeah, we know someone, right? The early 4 a.m., they get up and they go out to like Lake Simcoe and they're just out there. And the whole Sunday goes into that. And you try to tell them, like, dude, you could buy that fish in the marketplace. And they look at you like you just committed blasphemy, like, astaghfirullah. What? Because again, it's not about the fish. They'll say it's about the fish. It's not. It's about the feeling. Just sitting there on the open water with a group of friends and just talking and connecting. What does it look like to find peace in life? See, now, here's one way people think about peace. They think peace is when things are going exactly as we want them to go, everything's in its place, so I'm at peace, right? Everything's playing out the way I want it to play out, everything's according to schedule. Okay, I'm good. But think about that. If that's our understanding of peace, that is a fragile foundation upon which to build one's fulfillment in life. Because why? Why is the case? It's very obvious. It's not a trick question. Why is this such a fragile foundation? Because things will not always go as you want them to be. So then does that mean you just can't be at peace? Here's another way to understand peace, is by its opposite. If we understand the opposite of peace to be war, or less dramatically, conflict, chaos, then we understand that to be at peace, you have to avoid being in conflict. What does it mean to be in conflict? It's when you have something that you want and the other person has something else that they want, and we feel that we need to now, attack each other to get what we want, each of us. So conflict can be with other people, right? We can be in conflict with others. One way that we're often in conflict with other people is we demand that they be as we want them to be. I want you to be this way. Why are you not this way, the way I want you to be? I'm not happy with how you are, so I'm gonna fight with you to become who I want you to be. And the paradox is, but I want you to accept me exactly as I am. This is the paradox that we often get stuck in. Why is my mother like this? Okay, maybe she needs to change, but she's not happy with you. She's not happy with you. But you want her to accept you as you are. Isn't that what we want? It's a double standard that we employ in many relationships. I don't like who you are. You need to change in order for us to be friends. But yeah, you need to accept me how I am. Don't ask me to change. It's like, mashallah. So we're in conflict. We can be in conflict with ourselves. And we are often in a constant state of inner conflict. A part of you says, man, I need to get my life together. And a part of me goes in the other direction. A part of me says, go to the masjid, and a part of me says, keep doing the old habits that we have, hanging out with the same group of people that took us far away from the masjid. This is the battle. The angels whispering into our hearts goodness, and shaitan, the devil, whispering evil into our hearts. And the heart's constantly changing. That's the state of the heart. One of the most profound ways of conflict we find ourselves in is when we are in conflict with the world and life. We feel wronged. We conclude that life is unfair, that we don't deserve to be treated this way by God. Right? The world plays out a certain way, life plays out a certain way. I don't want it to be that way. So now I'm going to fight. Almost like if I just throw a tantrum big enough, God will concede and give me what I want. Because that sometimes works with human beings, right? Throw a tantrum big enough and maybe they'll just be like, okay, fine. Whatever makes you happy. Okay, I'll give it to you. That's how we resolve a conflict sometimes. We know that doesn't work with God. So we throw tantrums. I'm so upset with him. You know what? I'm not praying. Okay. I get it. There's pain. The pain is real. The pain is real. We don't like the way life is playing out. We don't like the family we're born into. We don't like how that one decision we made played out. But Sheikh, I did istikhara. I did all the background investigation. I did everything. Yes. But life is going to play out the way it's going to play out. There's a divine decree that you cannot outsmart. There's a divine decree that you can't overpower. And understand, we experience a lot of pain through when things don't go our way. There's a lot of discussion in different traditions about pain doesn't have to be suffering. That there's a distinction. Pain doesn't have to be suffering. Suffering is when we start to resist the pain and we fight it and say, no, no, I refuse. Why? Why is this happening to me? Why should this happen at all? Why did this not work out for me? Why did this deal fall apart? And we fight. And we hold off and say, no, I refuse to accept what has happened. I demand that what I wanted to happen should happen. There's conflict. And to put it one way, when pain meets resistance and rejection, it turns into suffering. And so we begin to suffer because we choose to resist. We choose to resist. What's the alternative? If I experience pain and I'm not going to resist it and fight it and refuse to accept, then what am I supposed to do? Just accept it and be like okay with it? Now let's make a little distinction here. No one is saying that if something is painful in life that you should not make an effort to change it if you can. No one is saying that you shouldn't do that. Be careful. I don't want you to leave with the wrong message, because I would never say that. I'm not saying that you find yourself in a difficult situation, don't do anything about it. Not at all. Absolutely do what's in your means to try to bring about a change to it. What I mean, though, is at a broader existential level, when we begin to just refuse to accept that life could ever play out the way it is played out. No, like I refuse. Why? It's like we're trying to stand and wage a war with God. That's what I'm saying. There's a big difference. Because you could make an effort to try to change something, and it might still not change. Then what do? Then do you stand and throw a tantrum? Do you fight with God? See, with human beings, you always have a hope that you could do what? You might overpower them. You might convince them. You might guilt them. Huh? You could gaslight them. There's a lot of things you could do to influence the human being. But in your conflict with God, the only pathway to peace is in surrender. It's in surrender. And the day we learn this is the day we begin to live much more peaceful lives. Islam literally means to submit. It's a form of surrender. Ya Allah, I can't force you to do anything. I can't. I'm not a God. I'm your servant. I can't change you. We accept our dependence and our weakness in front of the decisions of the divine decree. And so when we surrender and we correct our expectations of the world, we set ourselves up to be at far more peace. That's going back to our conceptualization. What if I went back and said, wait, I'm actually not entitled to anything. I'm actually not in a position to demand anything from God. I'm not in a position to bargain with Him. You know, when you lose something in life, one of the stages of grief is to bargain. You ever seen someone lose a loved one and they bargain? They say, God, I promise I'll start to pray Tahajjud. Just make sure, Ya Allah, don't make this person be gone. They start to bargain. They know they can never win the bargain. But a part of them still holds on to this idea that if I just promise God to fix my life and change things, that He'll undo what just happened. You can't bargain with God. And it's really difficult to come to terms with this because you feel very vulnerable. You feel like, whoa, so like this is just the reality that I have to face? The answer is yes. But maybe the reason why it was so difficult is because our conceptualization to begin with was flawed. I want to share a statement with you from the great scholar of our tradition, Al-Imam al-Junayd. He said, أصلت أصلا لا أتشبع بعده ما يرد علي من العالم. He said, I have this one principle according to which I live my life. And after understanding this principle, nothing in life overwhelms me. He says, وهو أن الدنيا دار هم وغم وبلاء وفتنة. He said, the principle that I live by is that this world is a place of worry, of sorrow, of trials, and of temptation. That's just the nature of the world. And he says, وَأَنَّ الْعَالَمَ كُلَّهُ شَرٌّ. This entire world is deficient. It'll never fully satisfy me. What I'm looking for, what I'm aiming for often is Jannah. It's paradise. And I'll never get that here. I'll never get that here. All right? Interesting how Jannah is described in the Quran as Darus Salam, the abode of peace, not the abode of happiness. It's the abode of peace. Again, really think carefully of what it is that you really think you want in life and that you think will give you and fill the emptiness that you feel inside. He said, look, the default of this world is that it's going to always send difficulty my way. And if it ever meets me with like something that I love and I'm happy with, that's just the grace of God. Otherwise, the default in this world is that things will be challenging. You know, I used to think about this when my children were younger. At what age do I tell them that this world is a tough place? What do y'all think? What's an appropriate age to tell your children that the world's a tough place? That you're going to suffer heartbreak, and you're going to have people who betray you, and there's a lot of evil out there. Yeah. Hmm. Beautiful. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, obviously, there's layers to how much you share, but no doubt to start to introduce them to ideas, right, about body safety, when they're young, 100%, right? Just because they're not old enough to fully understand the nature of the world doesn't mean you don't start to preemptively prepare them. And you start to let them know about certain boundaries and how the world is, how people could treat them. Absolutely. Why? The fear I think people have is, well, I don't want to like make them terrified and they don't trust anybody. And no, but you're just exposing them to the reality of the world. So they don't come to, like you ever seen a child the day they come home, the first time they're bullied? If they're not told that children can be really difficult sometimes, they come home and the world has fallen apart. How could I ever go and trust anyone and be friends with someone? I just got bullied. Where at home, hopefully they didn't get bullied. So if they're not used to it. All right, but when you tell them about it, that, hey, not everyone's going to like you. And that's so hard to understand as a young kid. Why not? Mom, you told me I'm great. You told me I'm perfect. You told me I'm excellent. Why would no one like me? Because people can be jealous. That's why there's so much wisdom contained in stories of prophets. Because you're not telling the child that the world, the people that you talk to are evil. You just tell them a story that's somewhat removed from their lived experience, but they can take the wisdom from the story. And you can explain to them how there's jealousy in the story of the two sons of the prophet Adam and the brothers of Yusuf. You can tell them about how people refuse to accept the truth in countless stories of the prophets. And they can begin to, okay, that's kind of how the world is. And if it happens, it's not because something's wrong with me. It's because, no, that's how the world is and that's how people are. What is our conceptualization of life? Look, you can't just accept that the world's a terrible place, though. You can't do that. That's too painful. Right? If you just think, oh, yeah, this place is just a place of depression and anxiety and pain and suffering, and then we're supposed to just go on with life? No. You can't choose your pain in life often. What we have control over is what meaning we assign to it. And it's meaning that gives us the strength to bear that pain. It is meaning and significance that it's not for no reason. Whatever I'm going through, whatever pain I'm going through, there's a reason for it. It cannot be that I'm just suffering arbitrarily. Humans refuse to accept that. And it feels like torture. And so when a human being finds meaning in their pain rather than being suffering, it actually can be a source of transformation. It can be a source of transformation. And in a much, you know, less extreme way, if you think about the pain that we put ourselves through when we go to the gym, right? When we make decisions that we know are good for us but are painful, they involve a degree of sacrifice, of depriving yourself of certain pleasures. Why are you willing to do it? Because there's something on the other side of it that you seek. There's meaning, there's purpose to it. If I told you that you can go to the gym for the next 5 years, there's nothing going to change in your body. Like, let's just say there's this, biological condition that no matter what happens, you go to the gym for 5 years, nothing changes in your body. Nothing. Would you go? At some level, we would say, no. I'm not going to feel any relief. I'm not going to get healthier. I'm not going to ward off, conditions, heart conditions and stuff. Why go? There's no need to go through suffering and pain if there's no meaning and purpose to it. And we refuse to do that. Which is why the first thing we ask whenever faced with a difficult task is, why? And so inshallah, in the coming weeks, we're going to study a book together. It's called Fawaidul Balwa wal Mihan. In Arabic, it's called the benefits, one might say the wisdoms of tests and trials. That's such a different way of thinking about the difficulties you go through. Number one, notice even the title. He didn't say the benefits and wisdoms of pain, right? He framed them as tests and trials, as if to say, look, you'll only learn the wisdoms and benefits in this book when you view them from that lens. If all you see them is as pain and no framework to process that pain, you're not really going to benefit from it. You won't learn the lessons it's trying to teach you. Remember, a test is only unfair when it asks you that which you don't have the capacity or ability to know and answer. A test is only unfair when it's testing you on something that you just can't answer. You just don't have access to. You don't have the capacity for. But we know that the test of life, God told us He will not test us or burden us with more than we can bear. And so the book highlights 17 wisdoms that we can learn from these tests and tribulations in life. And the hope is that through studying these lessons, we start to see our pain as a source of transformation and as a profound teacher in our lives. And maybe we can step back and reconceptualize how we think about life, not as a place and an experience that's meant to just be pain-free and, without any bumps along the way, but rather we see the pain as the mud, to use a metaphor, as the mud that's required for beautiful flowers to grow. Because that's really what it is. Right? The pain gives rise to really beautiful states in human beings. It's not uncommon to meet someone who has such a beautiful soul, but man, they must have been through a lot to get that beautiful soul. I literally read someone wrote today, everyone wants to polish, no one wants the sandpaper. Right? Everybody wants to polish, no one wants the sandpaper. You need that mud to get those flowers. You need that mess to experience that beauty. May Allah grant us tawfiq to really understand life as a test and to view our pain and difficulties in this life as part of that test. But then to enable us, Ya Allah, we ask Him to help us see the wisdoms and benefits in that and to use our pain as a means of transformation, to be able to alchemize that pain into something greater. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Jazakumullahu khairan to all of you for coming out. Next class, which won't be next Monday. Next Monday we won't have a class. We'll have a class the following Monday. On the, I think it's the 15th. We'll have class inshallah, and we'll begin the book inshallah that we're going to be studying. The book is, there is no good translation of it in my opinion. Ustad Abdul Rahman Murphy is working on one. Next time you see him, say, hey, did you finish that translation? Because I've asked him multiple times, but you guys can get on his case and be like, hey, finish that translation. We might get one then. So there's no good translation in my opinion. I'm just going to read from the Arabic and I'll try to explain it inshallah. Today I was just trying to like frame the topic of finding meaning in trials, right? Why the need to find meaning at all? Well, because it is through meaning that we're able to bear those trials, right? So hopefully inshallah it sets the stage for and sets the tone for the upcoming sessions inshallah. Hopefully you're able to join us inshallah. If you're not traveling, right? Mid-December people start to travel. I know people go on vacation, so you can still tune in on YouTube or whatever, but if you're like on the beach, I don't blame you, right? Just enjoy yourself. If you have to head back to Dallas, you have to head back to Dallas. You know, it's too bad. But yeah, inshallah. We look forward to seeing you guys, inshallah. All right, guys? Have a good night, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, what's happening? Sorry, guys. Just one quick announcement. In lieu of Thrive next week with Sheikh Zakaria, the next Monday, inshallah. What time? 8 p.m. There's going to be a coffee house happening. I think it's in the education center. It's with Sheikh Zakaria. MashaAllah, such a wonderful brother, Sheikh, MashaAllah, such a wonderful person. And some of you might have heard him. So please do come out, join that coffee house. There's coffee, right? In the hub, right? And there's refreshments. Okay, the snacks, guys. What more? Okay, inshallah, guys. Jazakumullah khair. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.